he asked them to leave the room, and
Oh, wow.
they did. And he had a very like stern talking to me. He's like, "You are not the type of person who I see in here, who I have to do with. You're a very smart, very bright young man. You have so much going for you. If you could see the life that I can envisage for you, you would be blinded by all of its goodness.
Wow.
There is nothing wrong with you. You can live a happy life with a man, and you won't go to hell for it." In that moment, like obviously you get to a stage where you do lose all hope, and you don't want either life. So you choose that, you to end it, because not because you want to die, but you want your life as it exists right that stage to die.
Mhm.
That's what I mean, I wanted to believe so badly what this man was saying. I wanted to believe him so badly, but what he sounded was just too wonderful to be believable. Contentment of that level surely could only be imagined and not able to be lived.
Welcome to the Get a Life podcast. Explore survivor stories. Uncover the hidden truths. Join our X-Cult conversations. You matter, and so does your story.
Trigger warning: discussion on physical abuse, sexual abuse, and suicide. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back, everyone. If this is your first time joining us, I am Cheryl, an ex-member from Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, and I escaped the exclusive Brethren sect when I was 17. It is now known as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. Today, joining me is Cassandra from Australia and Lindy from New Zealand, who are also both ex-members of the PBCC. So welcome, ladies. We have a very special guest today, Isaac Foster, that is originally from New Zealand, and he is here to tell his journey of leaving the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church and how he was able to create an incredible life for himself after leaving. Welcome, Isaac, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. Thanks for having me on. Kind of excited to be here. A little bit nervous as well because I've actually never done this before. Never actually really shared my story in its entirety.
That's awesome. I think these success stories are so important, and we are super excited to hear yours. I'm going to hand it over to you now if you want to give us a glimpse into what made you leave the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. And I also know the insiders will be excited to hear how you left, and if you have any tips for them from your experiences. And then we all want to hear about the adventurous life that you have built for yourself. So take it away.
Thank you. So this is kind of like a lengthy story, so bear with me. But to start off with, I'd like to preface it that like what I'm about to share is a difficult and very unpleasant story to listen to. However, if you bear with me, it does have a very happy ending, and that's why I'm here and what I really want to focus on. No matter what your past is, no matter what you have or had to or are currently enduring, like your future is absolutely not written yet. And on many occasions on my kind of my time in the PBCC, like I personally like lost all hope, even sort of like for like a half-hearted existence. And yet like right now I'm living the kind of life I used to believe was imaginary. um, I think it was Theocritus, the Greek poet. He was famed for saying, "Where there is life, there is hope." And so, like to those of you who are watching and listening, who also feel like stuck in impossible situations, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to hear my story. But more importantly, if you have lost hope, please, like I beg you, please keep going, because it's my hope that this story will hopefully demonstrate that no matter how insurmountable you believe your situation is, there is an unimaginable amount of good in store for you. And I think the first real step of that is asking for help, asking for assistance, and there is absolutely assistance out there for you. I think Lindy's website is a really good place to start. The Olive Leaf
Absolutely.
Network. Yeah. So that said, I'll get straight into it. I was born and raised in a little country town called Kaitaia, at the top of the North Island in New Zealand. Very large family, 12 children. We were quite poor, but we managed to have lots of fun with it. I had largely had like a really lovely, fun, well, it wasn't, right, let's just backtrack. It wasn't lovely, but there were times, there was like pockets of like really great moments. And most of those were spent with my siblings and my mother. We had a very loving and caring and selfless mother who was so devoted, well, as devoted as she could be to myself and my siblings. My siblings were amazing. They, some were more like indoctrinated than others. But like for the large part, they were very easy to get along with and lots of fun to be around. Unfortunately, we had to navigate an especially violent, raging father. Oddly enough, he wasn't an alcoholic, which is quite common in the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. In fact, he barely drank a drop. And when he did, he would water it down with lemonade. Oh dear. Each to their own. He was just simply an aggressive and volatile individual who was unfortunately just ruled by his impulsive selfishness. My earliest memory of him was myself hiding under the dinner table while he beat one of my sisters with a belt to the point where she fell to the ground. His anger didn't really have any boundaries. When we were children, he would beat our autistic brother. He would lock us under the house, which was like a 30 centimeter like high sort of like little pocket that you could kind of shove a child or a lawnmower underneath. We were severely beaten on like most weeks of our like I can't remember, like for as early as I can possibly remember, really. We were beaten with tools, pieces of wood, unopened bottles of like soft drink. I can remember at one occasion my brother and I were like having a little sibling tiff, and he came out with a unopened bottle of lemonade, I think it was. Yeah, it was lemonade. And he hit my brother and then hit myself, and he hit me so hard that it popped and I was like covered in lemonade. And the reason why I'm kind of smiling when I say that is because the first thought through my head was finally a drink of lemonade.
Isaac, can I interrupt there? Thanks for sharing this stuff. That's super painful. But I'm curious about, I love asking people this question. What number in the siblings were you? There were 12. Were you? Yeah, because it can impact your experiences, whether you were like, the oldest or the youngest, or were you like bang in the middle?
Yeah, absolutely. I was number 10. I had two younger brothers after me, 11 and 12, obviously. And I was kind of like raised by my like older siblings as well as my mother. And so yeah, I mean, I think even the older siblings like experience his wrath. Like it wasn't, I guess, I mean, he had his favorites. He had his favorites in his punching bags. But yeah, the older siblings also experienced his violent rages. It kind of like, at least, all of us received some sort of beating at some point from him.
Was this common knowledge in the Brethren that he was like this and that you guys were being beaten like this?
Yes. I remember my mother at one stage, she would hide with me in the family bathroom and lock the door, and he would like throw his weight against the door. And at one point she was so terrified, she called my older brother, who came and sort of tried to calm him down. Um, it sort of didn't work for a little bit, but then somehow like he just sort of like calmed. And I honestly don't know how that door held. It was it was like barely, like a thin sheet of plywood. Yet, yeah, it did hold. Yeah. So
Those are absolutely, yeah, it's I'm so sorry to hear this, Isaac. Like those are absolutely traumatizing and terrifying experiences for any person, no matter age, but especially a child that's so helpless. Yeah, that's really hard. Yeah, for just for the listener, if they don't know me, I grew up in Auckland and met Isaac's family when they were a bit older and moved near to Auckland. So yeah, I do remember your dad. I remember meeting obviously your mum and your dad and some of your siblings, and you've mentioned your autistic brother he was the next one above you, hey, in age.
yeah,
Yeah, and like yeah, lovely guy, but like yeah, quite severely autistic, right? So that would have been incredibly confusing and hard for him to be living with all those dynamics as well. And
yes,
yeah, I mean, I think, there are dysfunctional and abusive parents everywhere, but I think when they're inside a high control group like the Brethren, there's even less kind of access for support and help. And, like Cheryl's question, did the wider community know? Like, I'm sure they would have known in some ways because no secrets are kept, within a community like that. Like everybody
yes.
gossips. And yeah, but it's like, yeah, did any leaders or elders like try and stop that or like step in and help or kind of, was your dad a bit of a law unto himself kind of thing? And
Yeah, I mean, there was a few people that obviously, throughout my period of my time in there was a few people that talked to him and was like, you need to like back off, like you need to stop beating your children. This isn't acceptable. Even I actually credit, believe it or not, Daniel Hales like had a very stern word with him. And he would change. He would change for like a couple of weeks, but then he would just revert back to his
yeah,
like. So there were multiple people that did actually did try. None of the actual leaders that I'm aware of, apart from Daniel, had a word with them. It would just be the odd like
caring
there's
Joe blogs from among the
yeah,
community.
yeah,
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 yeah.
right. Yeah,
Uh,
that's super devastating and disappointing. But I'm also not surprised because I think so often the leaders of these brethren communities are actually completely ill-equipped to deal with major dysfunction or abuse that is going on in families. They've got no clue and they've often got like very limited compassion or empathy as well, or people skills actually. They've become leaders just because they were like wealthy or ambitious rather than actually because they had genuine leadership or emotional or people skills. So like I'm not surprised that the leaders in Kaitaia and Pukekohe or whatever like didn't actually help you guys. But that's super, yeah, they've let you down as well. Your community let you down as well as your dad letting you down. That's awful.
Lindy, there's also the aspect of they won't go to authorities because it's a slight on the testimony. So that's the really sad part is that even though clearly he wasn't changing long term or he wasn't listening long term, there would never have been the thought to go to authorities and actually have him, dealt with in the proper
Yeah,
authority
that's so true. That's
way.
so true. Like probably Isaac, your mum was never encouraged to talk to her doc, yeah, to reach out to social services. Or I mean, your dad should have been completely being sent to secular anger management courses and family abuse courses and stuff. But probably, yeah, there is that mentality, Cassie, of like, no, we don't reach out outside of our community for help because it's a shame on the testimony. And so, yeah, really, your family, Isaac, probably people just were turning a major blind eye over and over and over again for years as to what was going on.
and a lot of the thing, I think it was a lot of the times like placed in the too hard basket because that wasn't the only thing that was happening with our family. Which obviously I'll get into. I stopped. I don't know if this is helpful to mention anybody out there listening, but I stopped crying when I was 7 during his beatings, not because I wished to give him any kind of like satisfaction or some sort of like effort to be tough, but because I was so used to the violence at that stage. And I think that has like really affected my life, like going forward, because like whenever something really horrific happens, I don't show any emotion. Not that I am hard or like I'm like a stoic, you know, I'm a man. No, none of that. It's just that like I physically can't.
Yeah, it would be a trauma
I
response.
want to, absolutely, yeah. Like I would like to, like I would love to be able to cry. Like crying is a relief a lot of the time, but I just literally can't. It's very, very rare that I cry, and usually it's at the 11th hour. Yeah. So moving on, as this was happening, I then started being sexually abused from the age of 6. I didn't understand what was happening to me, obviously, being so young, and also due to there being no teachings on sexual abuse in the PBCC. I was very confused as to what was happening to me. I somehow knew at that age that it was a shameful secret. And I don't believe that the woman who was abusing me was truly aware of the crime that she was committing. And looking back now, I know that she was being sexually assaulted as well. Maybe before, but definitely during she was doing it to me. And possibly after as well. I know this because we were once out for dinner at her place one evening, and I walked in on it happening, and she asked me not to leave until this man had left her alone. Just a quick side note on that. I want to be clear that I'm not obviously trying to excuse her behavior with explaining that. I just want to simply point out that this could have been prevented if the PBCC wasn't built on hiding truth, if they didn't silence those being assaulted, if they actually taught sex education and the age of consent. All of this neglect, like coupled with their disdain for law enforcement, provided, and I guess would probably still provide to this day, the perfect breeding ground for abusers and abuse, not only to flourish, but to kind of go wholly undetected. Even as we speak, I don't believe that my family are truly aware of what happened to me as a child. During this time, my father, he got withdrawn from, essentially kicked out of the church for infidelity. I, again, was too young to know what really was going on, but I can remember the relief of the knowledge that I was going to be sent away from him. And I was going to be sent away from, well, you know, the other abuse as well. I was sent down to live with my sister in Hastings, her and her husband. And for the first time I experienced real friendship. I made some friends down there who were just incredible. They were just beautiful people. I got on really well with one particular lad, and we got up to all things like, you know, what children are expected to get up to. That was so healing. And hopefully if he's listening, like Luke and Jerry Curry, they are just spectacular. Them and their family were just beautiful people, and they would like continue to be that way until the day I left.
I'm going to jump in there for a minute, because when I think about you, Isaac, like the word fun is totally like one of the top 3 words that I would use to describe you. You're like a really, you know, I haven't had to do with you for years now, but like my memories of you are that you are so much fun, and it had such a great sense of humor. Like hearing more about how traumatic your home environment was, and yeah, how, you know, some of the severe abuse you've had and stuff. Like I'm amazed at that definitely, you know, even in your teenage years, but I bet it's still the same now, that fun and humor and playfulness are things that characterize you. So, but yeah, I'm wondering if like your time in Hastings, maybe where like some of that was allowed to flourish and you were allowed to like play and be a kid and yeah, be safe and have fun. Like maybe that's where some of that was allowed to grow in you.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, it was so helpful, and it kind of like showed me for the first time like what family life like should look like and what a life of a child like should really be. I think it like you're actually demonstrating now is it was a lot more, probably a lot more meaningful than I'm probably giving it credit for. I've also found like humor to be like such a reprieve from kind of like from disorder and dysfunction and pain and hardship. Like if I can like have a wee giggle, even if it's like wildly inappropriate, it sort of just alleviates some of that like stress and that trauma from taking hold. Yeah, and that our whole family was like that. Like we would always like when something awful would happen, we'd always look at each other and be like, so when can we laugh at, like, is it appropriate to laugh now? Like I know it's just happened, but like is it appropriate to make fun of it? And that, I mean, yes, like in some cases, inappropriate. It still was so helpful, like that element. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Lindy. Yeah. So 9 months later, my dad was brought back into the PBCC, and I was required to return home to, unfortunately, more violence from him and further sexual abuse. And one thing I've experienced from my time in the PBCC is if your family is poor or odd or maybe going through some difficult period, then bullying usually follows.
Yeah.
It is a horrible irony that the PBCC leaders peddle this idea that they're a supportive community. However, the reality is that when you're really in need of help, you are kicked instead of down, and sometimes literally. Sometimes it's wild. It's wild. I mean, as a result of this, like kind of like levels of torment, you can imagine I became a very confused and angry child, and as like nowhere was safe for me or my brothers. My anger helped in one area, as I can remember telling the woman who was abusing me to leave me alone or else I'd dob on her. She stopped after I threatened her, but then she began mistreating me in other ways, taking any kind of opportunity to lie about what I was getting up to, in order to get me in trouble. I guess this was like a tactic to discredit me. Like looking back now, I guess this was a tactic to discredit me if I ever broke my silence, and it somewhat worked too. I sort of became like a black sheep, if you will. It's a very dramatic term, but there we have it. And I began getting into fights at school after the PBCC church's meetings. Mostly of those fights were just to defend myself and my brothers from the violence I was experiencing there. And I was getting into fights at home as well, both with my siblings and my dad. While all of this was happening, I can remember begging my mum to leave the PBCC, as I didn't know why it was the cause of my problems. I just knew that it was. I wasn't aware of like obviously the systemic issues and the historical issues that were kind of like filtering down and affecting my life as it was. I just knew that it was the architect of all of my troubles. We then moved down to a little town south of Auckland for my brother, Rod, the one with autism, to get a proper education. At this stage, I started to defend myself and my brothers from like my dad's like beatings. He then changed tactics and would wait until I was asleep to give me a thrashing. So he'd come in my room once I was I was sleeping, and he would beat me while I was sleeping. This happened quite regularly. Between the ages of 13 and 14, I realized that the PBCC was somehow like just wrong on every level. I was very inquisitive, like curious child, and none of my questions were being answered truthfully, but being avoided, or I was just being simply shut down with, like your regular, don't fight it, just accept it, it's your birthright, all that nonsense. And to anyone like listening who is still a part of like a high demand religious group, I just want to point out something that sort of like came to me. It's something I think I've read probably. It sort of like came to me as I was like, typing out my notes, that anything good and right will remain standing no matter what kind of scrutiny it comes under. Therefore, if the PBC is indeed like the perfect place, as the leaders enjoy telling everyone, then it should welcome that a level of questioning, or any level of questioning, really. Just a little food for thought.
I just want to pause just there. Like, that is such a important statement that you just made. That is absolutely, if it really has the foundation that they believe it does, then it should 100% withstand everything everybody is throwing their way.
Yeah, and why wouldn't you encourage questions? If you've got all the answers, why wouldn't you encourage people to ask questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can all attest to them being wholly unaccepting to any kind of scrutiny. Yeah. Anyway, I began to rebel, as any normal teenager would do, but like also within a high demand religious group, and also question the leaders in my area. In fact, at that stage, I had a massive problem with authority due to all authoritative figures in my life at the time either assaulting me or proving themselves to be completely untrustworthy. I started to be very vocal about the obvious lies. I would brutally say what I thought about the more useless and bullshit-centric church sessions, which was fun and somehow satisfying, but would inevitably cause more problems, both of myself and my family.
What age were you when you moved to Pukekohe?
I was 13.
Okay,
Yeah.
13. And so that was when the Brethren were pulling all the kids out of the high schools and stuff, right? And starting them at the Brethren only school. Must have been exactly around that age. Like, did you go go to a non-Brethren primary and then you went to Westmount when you were 13?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I went to a non-Brethren primary and I went to a non-Brethren middle school. And then I was one of the first students to go to
their private.
Their private school. It started off in Pukekohe, and then obviously when I was in year 12, we merged with Westmount, and then that's when I started going to
which was in Auckland. So okay, so
yes.
so in your middle kind of teen years to the end of your schooling, you along with the other kids from Pukekohe, like it's like what, half an hour out of Auckland, you guys would be put on the bus and brought into the Auckland campus every day, which is quite full on, like quite a long bus trip. And yeah, that would have had its own challenges. You guys were naughty on the bus, weren't you?
We were. Yeah, we were cheeky sods, the whole bloody lot of us. I can remember those bus trips being quite fun. Like we would like just use them as time to like catch up with our friends. Yeah. So no,
I'm pretty sure I remember like going through bus drivers like toilet paper. Like they didn't really like the Brethren kids on the school buses. There's quite a bit of vandalism and like
that is not surprising. I mean, I probably would have had been like the perpetrator on many occasions for those poor bus drivers quitting. And if you're out there listening, I apologize.
Now they can listen to this and understand why you were acting out, right?
Yeah, it's probably the only place that you were relatively unsupervised, essentially. Like the bus driver was driving, he couldn't really do anything. you were all together with your peers, and it was the only time you could probably act out,
Yep.
where you wouldn't immediately be disciplined or pulled into
Mm.
line, if you know what I
Yep.
mean. There was a time period you knew that you had to kind of act out, and then the consequences might come later, but in the moment it was like your free, safe place.
Yes, exactly. And that's a
Mm.
really good point, Cassie. That's a really, really good point. I think like a lot of us have experienced that as well. Like, can you remember getting like a smidge of freedom and then just like
Mm.
taking it to the nth degree? Just like just using every last little drop that they give you. Yeah, no, like that's a really, really good point. Yeah. Not that that excuses my behavior in any way. No, that absolutely doesn't. But yeah, that's a very good point. It's a very good point. Yeah.
So you
So
might be going to talk about this, so ignore this if you are, but what was schooling in the Brethren School like for you? You know, like from what I know of you, you're a phenomenally creative person. You know, you're intelligent, you're creative, you were incredibly good at drama and dance and and creative things, and like all those things are not areas that the Brethren allow and like allowed to
Encourage.
flourish or encouraged to flourish. I think plays, they were allowed every now and then, but I think they're banned at the moment, and they've been banned for years. So doing things like drama and dance expressly forbidden, and even more so for a man. Like, what was school like for you?
I think like the first 3 years of high school were like horrible in the like Poki Koe sort of education. Not because of my teachers, not because of the students, but because of the way it was set up. We would be given a booklet, like from I think like some sort of kind of like correspondence school, and we would just like work through the booklet during the day, and then like at lunchtime we'd have lunch, and then in the afternoon we'd do exactly the same thing. And I was bored out of my mind. There was like I really personally appreciate like interaction with teachers and professors. I like sitting down and like questioning them and asking, like picking their brains, basically, like having someone in the room with that level of knowledge is should be utilized. And so I was just bored out of my mind, really. I can remember the first 3 years were just boring, really. And I think the Westmount School was like, although obviously it wasn't perfect and there was obviously a lot of problems, um, having a more sort of like normal school structure was helpful. And I ended up doing like the best, like when it comes to marks. I ended up doing the very best in
Right.
at the Westmount School, just because the way it was set out, the
Yeah,
way it
because in
was.
Pukekohe it would have been, yes, again for the listener who's not familiar, the Brethren, yeah, as Isaac said, did make students do kind of a form of homeschooling or correspondence for, yeah, it was a period of a few years. And so the kids would maybe get together like one day a week or a couple of days a week to work out of someone's house or a garage type room where some desks have been thrown in. But we're talking tiny groups of people, right? Like in Pukekohe, there would have been 10 or 15 students or something at that time,
Yeah.
or even if that. So yeah, very small, very boring, very, yeah, correspondence orientated, but not even like correspondence has often been set up for like somebody living on a farm rurally with an engaged parent to help them through it or that kind of thing. Whereas this is really ad hoc and weird, wasn't it? So yeah, so you're saying that when you actually then went to the campus that had been freshly built in Auckland, and that there was real teachers there every day and a structure to the day, and working through things with a slightly bigger class because it was students from Thames, Pukekohe, and Auckland. So I mean, I'm a similar age to you, right? We were a similar year, so there were probably as many as 20 kids in our class, or not that
Yeah.
many.
Yeah, at least 20, I think. I mean, the
Yeah,
first.
so it was a little bit bigger, a little bit more, as you said, teacher engagement. We had several different teachers, and yeah, okay. So you're saying you thrived a bit better in that environment, but still,
Yeah.
completely different to schools out here, right? Like again, we were not allowed to do any sport. Like we could kick a ball around on the field, but no boys or girls playing together, and no like organized sport, no, absolutely no inter-school engagement or competition, no music, no dance, drama. Yeah, a bunch of
Yeah.
subjects were out of bounds. So still very limited education and opportunities.
Mhm. Yeah. Yes. Unfortunately, I think like, I mean, there's a school that's just north of me, and I know this is a Perth school, so it's like obviously like a very Perth northern suburb school, so it's kind of a very rich school, but they have a cycling team, which is just wild to me. To
This
have
is
that.
not a Brethren school.
This is not a Brethren school. Yeah, this is just a regular school.
Yeah.
And so like yeah, just thinking about like what I'm like now, I think I would have really thrived in that kind of environment with there's just so many different areas in which you can excel at, it's not just
Yeah.
one area.
Yeah, the PBCC schooling system really deprives the kids of so many opportunities.
Yeah, and there's a grief process to that too, because when you realize what you've been deprived of, there's a grieving for that because you go through this process like what I could have been, right? The things I could have done. And
Yeah.
yes, we've still got time. You can still do things, but age is not now on our side. We've had to survive, we've had to leave and build ourselves a life, and that prime time of our lives was taken from us, where you have to go through a grieving process of all the things that you may have been able to do had you been afforded the opportunity.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
And when you're in those younger years too, right? Like to be able to go and experiment and try out this and try out that, that's when like we don't know what we would have liked back then, right? Because who we are now is so different than who we were back then. And I often have been thinking about this lately with so much going on with One School Global, and it takes you back into your own life. I was in a public school, but again, the same thing. You had to sit back when people were doing dramas. You had to sit back when they were doing certain sports. You had to sit back. There's all those things where you were like, I might have liked that, you know?
Mm.
And because we're such a different person now in our adulthood, especially going through the trauma that we've gone through, like we just don't know. And so those are big opportunities exactly that you grieve when you finally realize that opportunity was taken away from you. And I really, really do think that I'm hoping that out of this One School Global investigation that's going on right now, that there's certain certain laws that are laid down for these children because they need them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of terrifying to know that like they don't really have any access to the outside world anymore. Like I sort of feel quite lucky that at least
Yeah.
at like the knowledge that there's something not right in
Mhm.
my community. And I think that's sort of like the early years of schooling really helped with that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
They have nothing to compare it to right now. And that's what's really sad.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can't remember exactly what year it was, but like it was sort of kind of around the time going back a little bit, like when I was sort of really pushing the boundaries. John Hales, the leader of the PBCC at the time, died, and his son Bruce Hales took over. And the same year that this happened, a movie came out called Bruce Almighty. Much to my amusement, it turned out to be about a guy who was given some godlike powers. So I immediately nicknamed Bruce Hales Bruce Almighty. And on the occasion, and I'm sure a lot of other people like made the connection as well. On the occasion when I was feeling brave or extra extra brave or intoxicated, I'd call him that fat bastard. And that caused so many issues for my parents, for my siblings. And I think it was kind of like this, again, it was like my own little way of like pushing the boundaries and like seeing how far I could shove that envelope. And I think I was spurred on by the fact that like even other people didn't respect him to the level they possibly do now, given that he wasn't like so substantiated at that stage. And I
So was
kind
this
of,
when he was first coming into power, eh? Like, would have that been early 2000s?
yes, yeah, it
Yeah.
would have been, yeah.
Because there was a bit of unrest in the Brethren around, yeah,
Mm,
some people
yeah.
respected him, but nowhere near the way they do now.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And through this rebellious stage, I started noticing like this, like a number of things that I felt were just not on and like very problematic. I would listen as the members would make up rumors in real time while talking after church or during social gatherings, particularly at social lunches, almost always when alcohol was involved. I can remember wondering why we were all so concerned about other people's lives. And yes, obviously, gossip is fun, but why was it the cornerstone of almost all conversations in there? And it always made me uncomfortable because I knew that like gossip was why I was so, like myself and my family were so bullied in Kaitaia, like so horrendously bullied. And there'd be times where I would hear a story and I'd call the person the story was about and say, just a heads up, like this is what's being circulated. And I know that this isn't true, but just be forewarned. And it was kind of almost like, again, it was sort of part of that sort of rebellion, sort of like, I'm gonna do like they're gonna go that way, and I'm gonna go that way, and not out of any kind of like moral obligation, but because if I'm stuck in this awful place and I'm gonna have my fun with it, God damn it. Sort of like again around the 13, 14 year mark, I realized I was gay. Real 1-2 punch that one. Oh dear. Anyway, I obviously immediately tried to hide it. I
How
was
did
well,
that come to you?
it sort of like just presented itself, like obviously in puberty when like those changes are coming and you start feeling like affection towards like one sex or the other, and or both in some cases. There was just moments in which that sort of presented itself. I think one lad brought like a porn mag to school and I saw it and I was like, okay, I don't know why they're so obsessed with this. This is like nasty. Like respect, but like, no, thank you. Again, you go that way, I'll go that way.
Yeah. So you noticed that you were like your feelings towards that were different to what they were expressing, kind of thing.
It's 100%. And I think like if I look back even like before then, I'd sort of developed these crushes on men who were like kind and good and decent, but they weren't simply just respect. They were respect, but they were also like there was like a romanticizing of
Yeah.
that. I never had that with girls. Like I respected women and like women were like my friends, but that's where it like started and stopped. It was very platonic for me.
Yeah.
And I Googled it. I went to the library and Googled it and found like a name for it. And then I just like shoved it. Obviously, after that, I kind of like I shoved it to the recesses of my brain. This
Yes, because
cannot
yeah,
take hold.
because your like the surroundings would have been telling you that it was so forbidden and wrong, right?
Oh, 100%. I was aware, obviously painfully aware of that stage, that all kinds or points of difference in the PBCC were unacceptable and would always attract unwanted and adverse scrutiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just tried to get
So
on with life, really. I did the obvious. I prayed a lot, prayed the gay away. Nothing really worked. So I just kind of gave up and hoped at some stage it would just piss off. Plot twist, it didn't. Still here. Dang it. I was unfortunately then sexually assaulted again at 14 by a man in the PBCC while I was heavily intoxicated. He would have been in his mid-20s at the time. I was so drunk that I couldn't really remember much of the assault. But the next morning I had realized what had happened and reported
How old
it.
were you?
I was 14.
And was drinking at that age, I mean, we know this answer, but for our viewers and listeners, was drinking at that age of 14 acceptable?
Oh, 100%. Like I started drinking at 13 and then very quickly moved from beer to spirits. And then from spirits to almost pure alcohol. Like honestly, sometimes I would literally smell flammable. I was so intoxicated. And this was at 14 and 15, you know.
And
Yeah.
that would be at social occasions and stuff. Drink would be freely available for people under 18. And even though, yeah, you've said that your dad didn't drink much, but even if a parent didn't drink much, it was always expected that alcohol would be available in the house for guests and visitors,
Yeah.
right? So I guess it was also available in your home.
Yes. Yeah, it was. There's one thing our parents were pretty good with. Both my mum and my dad would lament over and over again to stop drinking so much, you know. But it was such a culture, and it was such a culture in there, and you were either drinking and a part of the party, or you were a party pooper, you know. And
Oh, you'd be bullied and mocked mercilessly if you didn't join in the drinking. My gosh, yeah. It was, people would make your life hell if you didn't drink.
yeah, 100%. So yeah, like I said, I reported the assault to my local priest, and he told me it was my fault, which I then believed for the next 20 years until I got therapy around 34 years of age. And I was unequivocally told that obviously I was 14 years old. Even if I was sober, then I didn't have the capacity to consent to such an interaction. But I was also drunk. And so just to add an extra layer of messy
Vulnerability.
yeah, and vulnerability, absolutely.
And was this 20-year-old man ever dealt with? Was he talked to? Was he spoken to? Was it reported to the
Yes.
police?
Definitely wasn't reported to the police, but I remember his priest's name was David Heath, and I can remember his priest saying the prolific amount of sexual abuse that this man had perpetrated on not just myself, but like other young members was eye-watering. So it wasn't just myself, it was other young men as well within my town, which was Pukekohe at the stage.
Not only that, it was well known.
Yes.
And authorities were never brought into it.
No.
Do you think this person's still in the Brethren?
No, he's not in the Brethren. He's left and he's married with children now. He's out of the Brethren.
Right, but possibly never been held to account.
No, not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. I just want to also, I want to just say right now, just very quickly, the reason why I'm choosing not to name these two people that sexually assaulted me is because I believe in one, specifically the woman. I don't think she would have done what she had done if she was in the PBC. I'm not excusing her behavior 100%. Like so many in there come of age, and then like most individuals, they begin to have these like very natural desires. But unlike regular people, they don't know what to do with them. And since they're not only uneducated on how to manage their physical desires, they're also not allowed to date. So instead of their desires being like managed consensually, they get bottled up, and then in some horrible, horrible occasions, they're forced upon someone innocent.
Yeah.
I noticed that like when the young men of my age in the PBCCs would get to a certain level of intoxication, they would turn these bottled up desires upon each other. And they weren't gay. They weren't. They would just didn't have a constructive outlet for them. What happened to me was unquestionably wrong and so unlawful. However, I personally don't want to, like, I guess, name them and shame them, because also the statute of limitations in New Zealand is 6 years. And if I accuse anyone, given that I have little to no evidence of what actually happened to me, apart from like my own words, I could be tried for defamation of character. And that is something
How much
that
older was the female than you at the time?
she was like a lot older. She would have been, again, sort of like late 20s, I think, as I recall. Yeah.
So quite a bit older.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. So moving on from that, I kind of realized that I couldn't survive. When I was 15, I couldn't survive in the church. So I contacted my older brother, who had left at that stage, and he had married. He was starting a life for himself. Contacted him, asked him to help me leave, and he said that he would. He asked me to be really honest with him, because he said this process was going to be difficult, given that I was 15 and I would need to be emancipated from my parents. So I told him that I was gay, and he immediately was like, no, we cannot take you. We cannot help you, because if you come out, homosexuality is very celebrated out here. You are not gay, and you will just turn to that lifestyle, and like we'll lose you pretty much. And I said, okay, great. Like, this is the first time I actually like kind of faced that kind of like distaste for homosexuality. So I just said, look, that's great. No one help me, fine. Please don't tell my mum and dad. Like, please don't tell mum and dad that this is what I told you. And unfortunately, he told my mother. She handled it pretty well. She was upset to begin with, but she handled it pretty well, given her, like very little knowledge about that topic. And she didn't tell my dad. I think somehow the rest of the family found out, but it was all just like shoved under the rug, and sort of, I'll just pretend that doesn't exist. And I was quite happy for that to happen, because I was 15 and I was so ill-equipped at that stage to deal with coming out of the closet. Was very happy in there. Obviously, moving on, kind of realized that being this way, being gay wasn't a phase, and I was kind of faced with a couple of impossible choices: either marry a girl and ruin two people's lives, or say goodbye to my family permanently and try to make it in the world, which I believed at that stage would take everything that I had from me and then leave me for dead. So I chose the third option. I attempted to take my life. It landed me in hospital, where I met a very lovely psychologist. One of the few occasions where brethren have listened to psychologists, and he asked them to leave the room, and
Oh, wow.
and they did. And he had a very like stern talking to me. He's like, you are not the type of person who I see in here, who I have to do with. You're a very smart, very bright young man. You have so much going for you. If you could see the life that I can envisage for you, you would be blinded by all of its goodness.
Wow.
There is nothing wrong with you. You can live a happy life with a man, and you won't go to hell for it. In that moment, like obviously you get to a stage where you do lose all hope, and you don't want either life. So you choose that, you to end it, not because you want to die, but you want your life as it exists right that stage to die. That's what I wanted to believe so badly what this man was saying. I wanted to believe him so badly, but what he sounded was just too wonderful to be believable. Contentment of that level surely could only be imagined and not able to be lived. During and after this period, it's another thing I just want to touch on, that might help maybe some listeners in the Brethren. during and after this period, I can remember coming into contact with individuals who had left the PBCC, and inevitably they would take it upon themselves to vigorously point out all the evils and failings of the organization. To me, this approach, I mean, would kind of always leave me feeling miserable and somehow annoyed with them as the messenger, instead of being upset with the real evil, the individuals who actually ran the PBCC and perpetrated all of this awfulness that I was experiencing. Now, I believe, I'll put it to the group, what you guys think, but I believe this was due to them kind of disrupting me sleeping at the wheel of my life, so to speak. I subconsciously kind of already knew what they were telling me, but hearing this inconvenient truth, so obviously laid out for me at this stage when I didn't have the knowledge or capacity to do anything about it, only caused further misery on top of everything else I was trying to navigate. Like, I don't believe a lot of individuals who are still in the PBCC need to hear that where they are living is fundamentally evil. Instead, I think they need attainable solutions to navigate their way to real freedom. Something I would have sincerely appreciated, and something I believe that you have managed, Lindy, with again the Olive Leaf Network. So thank you so much for that. Oh my gosh.
I think also a part of what you would have been experiencing is that when you're told those things, they're very uncomfortable, and the indoctrination that we grew up with was that if it's uncomfortable, it's from the devil, and so you shut it down, right? You just shut it down, shut it out, block it out. So I think that when you're told things that you really have started to think and been uncomfortable with, you've learnt to close that down. But then when somebody reaffirms that, it's even more uncomfortable because it's dragging those feelings back up.
Yeah.
And so your immediate instinct from the indoctrination is to just close it down, put it away. It's from the devil.
Yes, exactly.
And that's why it's so confronting.
Yeah, 100%. I think like they've have these like inbuilt like security measures. I sort of like think of it as a prison, where you've got like the bigger walls inside, you're inside, and you climb over that wall, and then there's this like other wall that you have to climb over. And so, you know, those people sort of are helping me get out the first wall. Once I was out the first wall, then these like alarm bells and like these kind of security measures were going up, and in the form of like my own indoctrination, you know, like the discomfort of having to listen to this. And no, 100%. Like I believe that, and I've experienced it with one of my sisters as well. Like I speaking to her, and then her messaging me and telling me she can no longer speak to me because she was beginning to have doubts, and the doubts were of the devil, and so on and so forth. I mean, we've all heard it. Yeah. So yeah, 100%. Yeah. So in my 20s, I kind of like felt my fate in the PBCC was sealed. So I decided to once again go back to having as much fun as possible. If I was going to be forced to live a certain way, then I damn well was going to enjoy it. So I ran off to Fiji. Nothing like a summer
That's
holiday.
right.
Yep.
You were like 17 or 18.
Yeah, 18 year olds.
And like again, for the viewers and listeners, unheard of. You are so not allowed to go to Fiji because there's no brethren there and no meetings. And Isaac and a friend just like booked flights and tootled off to Fiji, right?
Yes, yeah. For 2
How
weeks.
long were you there for?
For 2 weeks. It was spectacular. I still have fond memories of that trip.
How overwhelming was it in the terms of just suddenly, did you feel like you just landed on a whole nother
Foreign planet.
Yes. I mean, we met a lot of people there who sort of like figured out, like we were very young, like a very, very young cohort. Like a lot of the people were like in their mid-20s or 30s, and we would meet a lot of people there, and they'd be like, "Where have you come from?" We're like, "Oh, we're just running from the law." And they would be like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, yeah, well, like keep running, like don't go back. Yeah. So no, it was a good time. I personally I hope my friend enjoyed it, but I personally really enjoyed it myself. And it kind of gave me a bit of a a view of what life could be like out there,
Yeah.
like not having to check your six, like not looking over your shoulder, just waking up and like just getting on with your day, like going snorkeling, lying on the beach with a book. Yeah, just eating when and whenever you wanted. Was very much enjoying my Fijian holiday. After I returned, a a local priest named David Heath from my locality started looking out for me. Initially, he was very kind. He's very gentle, very fatherly, very easy to talk to. We had quite a few hours of chatting, and it was such a reprieve. It's the first time I was able to talk uninhibited about everything. I didn't mention the sexual abuse, but I did talk about being gay and like having these desires. And he was really kind. He was very open about this. And he said, like he told me that like he'd come across this before, and this was unfortunate. He was very helpful, very, very helpful. And yeah, again, like being able to talk to someone and sort of like feel having a father for the first time. I think I told him that multiple times as well. Like, I've sort of really never known what it was like to have a dad. And so that was really, really helpful, really helpful. However, when I turned 22, I went to America on holiday, caught the travel bug. And this time I went for a month. And when I'd returned, I'd been confined, or for those who don't know what that term means, kicked out.
Like your first level of excommunication. So it's like they call it being shut up. So it's like your first level of confinement. The next level is being completely kicked out. It's called withdrawn from.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those terms are interesting because confined was a term that was used, and like it literally does. I mean, Isaac, it reminds me of, you said earlier that your dad would, put you guys in through this little door under your house, but it reminds me of that. Like, to be confined is to have your freedom and your movement restricted. And same with the term shutting up. Like, I think originally it probably meant to close up, but when we hear it now, we think shut up over, tape over your mouth, and effectively it's the same thing. And it's very psychologically severe treatment to go through, even though it's not the full excommunication process. It's almost the same, except that you're still visited by priests because they're hoping to restore you. Whereas once you've been excommunicated, they give up on you completely and you're gone and you're no longer visited by priests usually. But so shutting up is an extreme psychological thing to go through. I mean, when I look at, here in New Zealand, it's illegal, for example, to put people into solitary isolation in prison or in, mental health care units or whatever. But effectively, that's what being confined is. You get put into solitary isolation, and so often that means that nobody other than the priests are allowed to talk with you, and they may only come every few weeks or every few months. Some people have gone for over a year without being visited. But so your family members are not allowed to talk to you, friends are not allowed to talk to you. If you're employed, you can't talk to your workmates. And bearing in mind as well that your whole life you've gone to church every single night of the week, and then multiple times on the weekend, but all of a sudden you're forbidden from that. Yeah, you have to eat your meals alone, often in your bedroom, in your house, so you can't eat with your family, you can't talk with them. It's totally cruel. And sorry, Isaac, what age were you, and were you at school or working when this happened?
I was at work when this happened. I was 22.
You were at work.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
remained, so they kind of like, when I returned, they moved me out of my home and they placed me in this studio apartment. So it was literally oh, like a small lounge with a bed and a kitchen in it, and then a bathroom off. That was it. And I was there on and off for like 15 months,
Wow.
mostly.
My
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And you would have been employed by Brethren because that's all you're allowed to do?
No, so I'd lost my job because obviously I didn't give notice for going away on holiday. But I couldn't, because if I gave notice, then I would be found out and stopped from going.
Okay, so you lost your job with Brethren People.
Yes, I did, and I was required to find work elsewhere, which I did, and yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Oh, so you actually began to work for a non-Brethren. Well, like, was that actually a good thing in retrospect? Like, that's actually giving you a doorway into some more autonomy.
yes, it was. It was good in the fact that they gave me the tools to kind of like I was forced to learn the tools on how to like apply for like other work. That really helped. That really, really, really helped for sure. And I also, because I oddly enough began working for a company that did boat building using like teak wood. And I learned all these different skills, like woodworking skills, and which I just like I use today now. So that was actually like really great. I actually really enjoyed it, oddly enough, like working in literally a sawmill, really. Yeah, creating like these beautiful boats out of the like a log, like an entire log would come in and we'd literally cut it up and then like quarter saw it and um literally create an entire boat out of this.
Wow.
It was amazing. I had so much, I actually had a lot of fun. Yeah. It was
And
kind
so
of like my
your
brother.
priest came to this job, like it was and to tell you that you had been confined?
No, so basically what happened was when I got back from America, I was told that I wouldn't be living at home. So I got moved out and they said I would need to pay for my own accommodation and I'd need to find work. So I immediately found work. I found it pretty quickly, which was great, at the teak decking sawmill place. Yeah, and then I was just functioning out of like work and home, and they would come and visit me in this like little studio apartment. I had another priest assigned to my case. His name was James Pierce. David, who I previously mentioned, he had changed completely. He went from being obviously a very loving, caring father to being just very cruel, very malicious. It was almost like I had wronged him in some way, and he was sort of punishing me, I guess.
The very fact that he wasn't able to save you would have been probably hard for him to accept, and it would have looked bad on him. So I suspect that possibly a lot of that would have come from the feeling of being of failing with you, and so his only way of expressing that would be to get back at you or to take it out on you, I guess.
Yeah. I
I
just
don't
couldn't.
know that for fact. I obviously don't know that for fact, but I just feel like in this situation that he had taken you under his wing and he was probably, like tasked with saving you as such. And then when he failed at that, it would have looked quite badly on him and reflected quite badly on him in the terms of the community. And so he was possibly retaliating by taking that out on you.
Yeah, yeah. I was like 100%. I think like that seems fair. Like I was just genuinely blinded. Like he was a completely different man.
Yeah.
There was nothing of that kind, decent, like father-like soul. He was cold and hard, and the stuff that he would say was just absolutely designed to just literally floor me
Break.
and yeah, break me pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was the worst period like of my life to date, weirdly enough. It was unlike anything I've experienced before. The torment of being stuck in a room for hours on end,
Yeah.
knowing an end, like an end date. And in some ways, I mean, I don't know what jail is like, and I don't ever want to know what jail is like. But in some ways, I would like almost prefer jail because there is a term which you can work towards. There is some hope. In this case, there was none. I would ask, like I was just in this perpetual state of limbo, I guess. I would have liked to have left at that stage, but David and James, they made their blackmail very clear that if I continued to do what I wanted, I would just no longer have the same relationship with my family. In short, I would be excommunicated. And David knew prior, obviously, to me going to America, I had confided in him just how much my family meant to me. They were everything. I didn't want a life without them, and he knew that. And he used this as a way to keep me in that apartment. I can remember consistently asking David and James why they were doing this, and they told that it was because I was lawless. Just pointing out, just a little point here. I don't think someone who is trapped in a high demand religious group that's just trying to wrestle back a little control of their lives can be called lawless. The leaders of the PBCC, they perpetrate this awful mentality that if you villainize someone enough, then you will feel justified and in some cases righteous when you treat them badly or unlawfully. If you create a villain mentality of a person, you can do whatever you want to them.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And they also teach, they've got phrases in there like the assembly loves a broken person. Like they teach a high value on somebody being psychologically smashed so that you are completely submissive, which again, that is a tactic that's well known to be used among highly coercive controlling groups or individuals to psychologically break someone, because then they're useful because they'll do whatever you tell them to do. And the Brethren have laid this religious language over that to try and make it sound like it's come from the Bible or come from, that it's a spiritual or religious ideal to be broken, or that then you're humble, or, putting other values like that on it. But actually it's about, psychologically smashing you so that you are just, useful to them, because you're not someone who causes any waves or challenges the authorities. You just do what you're told. And, when they say something like that you're lawless, they're referring to the fact that there's this part of you that is refusing to just lie down and surrender to everything that they're coercing and forcing you to do and to be. And so, then they choose, as you say, they choose this negative language to put onto you to make it like a moral and an ethical judgment on you. Whereas actually, it's not lawless, it's not bad. As you said, it's perfectly normal for people to want to ask questions about how they're being made to live.
And if anybody hasn't watched episode 110, like that was the podcast with the audio of a priestly visit. And that was a perfect example. Like it was such a heart-wrenching podcast to create, but it was very much needed so people could wrap their heads around what each and every one of us have been through when we talk about the absolute horror of what a priestly visit is like. And like you, Isaac, I very much relate to you on these priestly visits where I never saw a way out. For me, I just wanted the torture to stop. Right. And so same for me. I was going home. I was going to take my life, but I was just going home. I didn't deserve that kind of torture. And there's no way out of it, especially when they use your family as leverage on what they can do to you. And so those priestly visits, like you heard in podcast 110, that is what happens. These priests just become ruthless in trying to break you. And they get absolute joy out of it. I mean, my priest did. My priest got absolute joy out of watching me break or our family break, to the point of where you're sobbing in tears and you literally don't know how you're going to get up from it. And so I do think that this is one of the biggest issues that I hope down the road, the Royal Commission, those people that take care of what's happening inside the PBCC, listen to an audio like that and listen to the pleas of every single one of us that are out here retelling our stories. That's the message we're trying to get through, is that there's absolute horror that is happening inside there, still happening to this day, that if we could just get the law involved, this stuff should not be happening in a mainstream Christian church, as they call themselves.
It's psychological abuse. Like it's literally psychological torture to break you
Yeah.
to the point where you will do everything that they say.
Yeah.
And they're using every tool in the book that they possibly can. And you're at their mercy. You are completely at their mercy as to when it's finished, as to what, like, and they really want to be able to tell that you've given up every thread of self-will, and that's their goal, is that you have literally given up every thread of self-will, and they will not relent until you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been out 32 years. It'll be 32 years this year. And one of the main things that I still go to therapy over is how to recover from those priestly visits. It's hard as an adult to get yourself back up when the tiniest thing can trigger you to go back into that mode of submission that you had to be in order to be able to get out of the situation that you were in. So it is, I guess it's something that's very near and dear to me on trying to find some way. I had a conversation with the police the other day. I was sobbing my face off at trying to convey to him, like, what do I do? Tell me what to do. Tell me what to do in order to get laws changed, right? If we can't, it's heart-wrenching hearing and reading the stuff that lands in my inbox and trying to fight the battles that I'm fighting. When it's the laws that we need to change the laws. We have to find a way to change the laws, but it's hard to get inside those laws when we're met with this rhetoric of the lies that the PBCC give back and the way that they find a way to cover up. Like, my heart is breaking inside for you, Isaac, because I relate so much to your pain. And I think it's super important that we come together as a unit and try to find ways to get inside the legal system, get inside a way to be able to really let these people know that are in charge of making these laws that this is still happening. I had reported back to me something that was just said, and it literally was reported to the police that this stuff no longer goes on. And I'm trying to tell the police, no, like, I would love to hand you over my computer and you can read everything that comes into onto my inbox.
Yeah.
As of 2024, everything that Isaac is saying, everything that you heard in podcast 110, everything that every survivor comes on here and talks about is still happening in 2024.
Yeah.
I only like as you said, like Cheryl, like they were my priests, David and James. They were David specifically was like he took great joy in doing what he did to me. Like, there was this one time where I did actually cry, and he was smiling while I was crying. Like, I just blindingly cruel.
The sad part about it is they actually believe that they're doing the right thing. Like, they are so indoctrinated that they genuinely believe that they are doing the right thing. And it's just, it's so mind-blowing.
And that's unfortunately why they are so successful.
Yeah.
Is because of that belief.
Yeah.
Obviously, like I said, this period was undoubtedly the worst period of my life to date. During this time, I wrote a short note what was being done to me, and I can remember being worried that that I'd eventually break and make another attempt, at this time more a permanent attempt on my life, and these priests would get away with what they were doing. And so I made this note, and planned if I ever got to that stage again, that I would send it to both law enforcement and a newspaper before I did anything permanent. And yes, what they do is a crime. I looked it up. It's called deprivation of liberty. For those of you who may be listening that are still in there. I like to just
deprivation of liberty.
Yes, and in some cases, in some cases it can be classified as kidnapping if you are a part of a high demand religious group.
Because it is a human right. And again, the human rights thing's a bit tricky because some of it's not actually, you can't actually prosecute for it or whatever. And if you look at the Bill of Human Rights that New Zealand agrees to and that kind of thing, freedom of movement. I remember the first time reading that, going, freedom of movement is a human right. Like, you can move wherever you like around your country. You can live wherever you like. You can go on holiday wherever you like. You can hop in the car and drive to see someone or fly somewhere. You do not have to get anybody's permission. And I just remember being so shocked when I read that, because I was like, like the Brethren routinely have got whatever you want to call it, doctrines or values or whatever language you want to use it, but for the common person in the Brethren, my understanding is that you have to fill out a form to get permission to go and visit a family member in another city, or at least to get approval, or at least to notify somebody about it. I'm not sure of the exact things today, but like, we knew we couldn't just take holidays. You knew you can't move house or join a different Brethren suburb without going through the right approval channels. So it's like, oh wow, okay, like there's just things in there we accepted that we didn't realize are actually, I think, quite possibly a breach of some of the human rights.
Yeah, I agree.
This is the note that I wrote. I actually end up including it later on in a letter that I wrote to Bruce Hales to request some kind of compensation for time stolen, because when you go to prison wrongfully in New Zealand, you get $1 million per year for wrongful incarceration. And this wasn't not only wrongful incarceration, it was illegal as well. And I'd spent over a year in this little apartment. So here's an
So you wrote to Bruce Hales?
Yes, I did.
Asking for compensation for that time?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating, Isaac. Tell us about that.
I'll tell you about that later. We'll definitely get into that. So without further ado, I'll just read this note, and this will kind of give you a bit of an idea of like where my mind was and what was really happening.
To be continued. Stay tuned for part 2.
How can you support Get a Life podcast? You can donate internationally via PayPal at www.paypal.me/getalifepodcast. PayPal also has a QR code that can be scanned. Or donate to our Get a Life podcast GoFundMe.
If you're in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Check out www.get-a-life.net for Get a Life merchandise, books, and ways to support or get support. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.